And so that entity, the self, the mind-made self, that lives on resistance to now, dissolves. And suddenly, space consciousness, unconditioned consciousness, emerges. And when that emerges in your life, there's always an important aspect of that is a great sense of peace. No matter what is happening around you. So it's people who are brought to it are not brought to it usually because suddenly things get so much better in their lives, and finally they get so much better and better and better, and finally they become enlightened. Usually it's the other way. They get worse and worse, and they lose and become more limited, and until finally something snaps, and there it is. So it's through loss and limitation, in the absence of a spiritual teaching, that you become free internally through loss and limitation, but only potentially. Not every human being can walk through that doorway that opens when there is loss and limitation in your life. Most humans would still look the other way and look to more future. Don't look at the loss, don't look at the limitation, try to get away from this. So then you're sitting in prison, and then for 10 years you're working out plans to escape. And you try this and you try that, or you project, when I get out I'm going to do that, and then you live totally there. I'm finally going to make it when I get out. So there's potentially, through loss and limitation, which are called the worst things that could happen to a person, are actually, because life is ultimately not cruel but benevolent, through loss and limitation, the doorway potentially is there. In other words, it opens. Whether you walk through, we don't know. And so that is, everybody has a spiritual teacher, even people who've never looked at a spiritual book or even heard of any spiritual teaching, and that is encountering loss and limitation in your life. And then when that happens, potentially the doors open. Through loss it opens, because loss on whatever level, loss of possessions, loss of status, loss of opinion that other people have of you, whatever kind of loss, the thought forms that are associated with those contents, opinions of other people, of me, possessions that are mine, achievements that are mine, and they are lost. The thought forms that had been created, that gave you a sense of self, also crumble when the external object is lost. The inner object, the thought form, crumbles, and that is suffering. It's called suffering, because the thought form had self in it. There was me in it, and me is dying when there's great loss. Me is dying. But potentially, now where the form has just collapsed, the thought form, there is a little open space. Before there was a form, an object covering up the open space. Now it's dissolved, and an open space happens inside you. When you don't run away from it and don't deny it and resist it, through that open space comes unconditioned, what I now sometimes call space consciousness. And when it comes through, it's great peace suddenly. Something is gone, I should be feeling dreadfully unhappy, but suddenly comes through the opening comes emptiness, as they call it in Buddhism. Before there was something, now there's nothing. And through the hole comes what Buddhists call emptiness, which is also fullness, but nobody can, not one designation is right. Space consciousness, presence, simple I amness, because I am that and that and that has collapsed. I thought I was that, but that's gone. And then I thought I was that. I thought I was a successful stockbroker, that's collapsed. I thought I was a husband, that's collapsed. I thought I was a good father, but my children left me, that's collapsed. One thing after another collapsed and leaves nothing but holes. And that's great, because the formless, when a form dissolves, the formless is there. So I am that is gone, I'm not that anymore, I'm not. And sometimes all that's left is I am, but there's nothing that anymore that I am, that all objects have gone. And I'm left with bare, naked I am. So life can do that to you. It removes things from you until you are left with the nakedness of all you know is a sense of beingness or presence, but that is deep and beautiful. Before that got mixed up with being a stockbroker and being a father and being a husband and being some other role. Those have collapsed. And so what's left is just being itself, I amness itself. Wow. That is called realization, liberation. On the mind level, you may not be able to say anything about it. And when people ask you, who are you? You might say, I don't know. I don't know anymore. I thought for a long time I knew who I was, but now I don't know anymore. And yet, on some deep level, there is some kind of knowing, but I can't put it into words. So those people became the first spiritual teachers who later had realized and could talk a little bit about what happened. They looked back and maybe they realized that surrender happened, complete surrender happened. The loss was not resisted, the limitation was not resisted, and it became an opening. And then they talked about it and say, this could also happen to you. You're so unhappy, it doesn't have to be like that. I was even more unhappy than you, and it came to an end. And so that was the beginning of a spiritual teaching. And then they even created so-called monasteries, places where others came, and in some cases what they tried to do was to recreate the conditions that otherwise would happen to you naturally through life, that might have happened to them through life. So what they did was, people come into the monastery and they say, okay, now, as you come in here, you lose your identity here. First thing, you shave your head, because hair is to do with external appearance, which is a thought form of me. Then you leave behind your clothes, because that's another thought form, showing your status, or male and female, whatever. You leave behind your clothes. Then you leave behind your name, because that also is a thought form. So you get a new name, a spiritual name. Dangerous, but... And they give you clothes that everybody wears the same clothes, so you cannot differentiate yourself from others. You can't compare yourself and say, mine is a bit nicer than yours, although they try to do that. And then they create conditions that are not satisfying, not very much food. You have to, no possessions, nothing that you can call mine. And then many situations are created there that normally you would call unacceptable. You have to get up at 4 a.m, and then you sit in meditation in a cold room. In Zen, they might even open the windows in the winter. And you sit facing the wall, empty stomach, a cold room. You can imagine how much suffering arises if there is still a story and mind activity around this situation. Why did I ever come here? This is madness. What am I doing here? and more mind activity, more suffering is almost, they create a situation that would bring up a lot of resistance. And so you can watch the resistance. And it's possible, if it works, it can take a long time, if it works, and then they have other things in Zen, you meet the master, he asks you questions, sometimes that have no logical answer, famous Zen questions, and you spend time, what's the answer to this left? And all designed to finally drive you to a point where the mind stops. And suddenly, there's this influx of peace and aliveness, even while you're sitting facing the wall. The stomach is still empty, the body is still cold, and yet nobody is left to resist this moment. And so there's suddenly this influx of spacious presence, of aliveness. And then the Zen master comes and asks you some nonsensical question and says, give me the answer now. And suddenly a spontaneous answer comes out of your mouth. It may be nonsensical too, but the Zen master is only listening to what level the answer is coming from. And it comes from the deepest level spontaneously, and the Zen master says, good. Or says nothing, walks away. Because the answer came from there, from the deepest place, and it's not what you say, it's where the answer comes from. So, because whatever comes from directly out of the unconditioned consciousness has power, newness, and freshness to it. It doesn't matter what you say as an answer. So that's because the Zen master could tell one person who says the same answer as the other person. To one person he says you're wrong and hits you, and to the other person he says, good. So when you go into these monasteries, the first monastery that arose were often designed really to recreate what otherwise happens through life naturally, what life does to you. So things are taken away from you. They're not more things are given you, things are taken away. It's not that you encounter less limitations, you encounter more limitations through going into the monastery. So the opposite of that would be the mind, the little self saying, if I could only find that ideal retreat place in California where we get up to a beautiful breakfast, aesthetically enormous amounts of fresh fruit, and everything is totally healthy and full of life and aliveness, and there are flowers, there are birds, and the first thing after breakfast you get body work done for 2 hours. And then you go into the pool and and then you sit on a quiet terrace overlooking the ocean for 1 hour. And when it's time, then they have prepared your lunch. And you might think, well, now surely the situations must be ideal for me to reach enlightenment. And you'll find this isn't working either. And after 2 months there, boredom sets in and discontent comes in. And what am I doing here? And you go to sleep, you feel tired after getting up. And it's sunny again. Every day it's sunny. So the mind has certain ideas about how it's going to happen to me, usually not correct ideas, because the mind thinks in terms of adding. Something needs to be added for me, for it to happen. Nothing needs to be added. It's here now, and you can know it now, through no more adding being necessary at all. Nothing needs to be added, nothing needs to be changed. And if you cannot realize presence now, at this moment, in other words, it's not going to get any better than this. How could it? This is it. This is. If you can't realize it now, then you will realize it through some, not adding, you'll realize it through some loss. Okay. You can't lose. I mean, eventually you will realize. But this is the most gentle way. And if life hadn't already, probably, if you had not already come into contact in your life with limitation and with loss, probably you wouldn't even be here. So that's already, the process has already started. It's only, for quite a few of you, it's only by the grace of already having gone through major loss or having experienced major limitation in your life that you are here. And you may not know it, but the emergence of that which is unconditioned, the I am, is already happening. It happened, perhaps, at that moment of great loss that you experienced, and you didn't know it. Something crumbled. Something also still resisted it, perhaps. There was a reciprocal movement of resistance and something that you couldn't resist. So, really, we're talking about death coming into your life in one form or another. Because loss means some form of death. And death is usually called bad by the mind. The worst thing that could happen. Any kind of loss is a kind of death. If you derived your sense of self from thought forms. Because the thought forms crumble when there is loss, which is the me crumbles. And the good thing is, you can't go through life without experiencing that. It will come to everybody. So the potential, the doorway opens up even if you never come into contact with spiritual teaching, but it gets much easier through the grace of a spiritual teaching, the essence of which tells you you don't need more time to be free, and you don't need more suffering. You don't. If you see that clearly, you don't. Because this is your voluntarily embracing the end of the conceptualized sense of self in the head. The end of deriving your identity from mental content. You are here. Nobody forced you to come here. So this is already happening in you. You're dying already, and perhaps the first part of that death was involuntary. Life did something to you, removed something from you, or made you encounter extreme limitation. That part was involuntary, but that initiated the process, the emergence, and that brought you here. And this part of the process, it gets much more pleasant, because this is a voluntary embracing of the end of the conceptualized me in the head with its story. And that's a beautiful death, that we are dying here. And ultimately, nothing real dies. only certain forms. You don't even lose your memory, it's not a requirement. Memory remains. You have a past, but you don't derive your identity from the story of me. The identity flows continuously out of the fullness of now, the aliveness of now, the power of now. That is your essence. And now, what is now, except the space in which everything happens, the alive space in which everything happens. So, freedom is here, the door is open, wide open, and you're walking through. Certain patterns, certain configurations in consciousness may remain, but the space is there around it. The pain body may remain for a while. Pain that humans carry in here from the past, from the human past and your personal past. First there's the pain from your personal past in childhood, then there's the pain from human past, going back a long time of human madness, so much madness on the planet, so much suffering. Every human carries pain, which is human pain. We know, most of you know about the pain body. And you carry that. It lives in here, a little forms, emotional energy forms, painful energy, residues of past pain, emotional trapped aliveness, not flowing, old emotion that comes. Pain that you suffer in your childhood is added to the pain that you already come into the world with. That is human pain. This is the pain body. And so more pain clings to it. It seeks pain. It's a little entity, an emotional entity, dormant sometimes, active at other times. Active it becomes when it needs more food. And then suddenly a little trigger in your life creates an enormous influx of pain. The pain body is looking for more pain to feed on. And it moves into your mind. And then it gets hold of your thoughts. And all your thoughts become painful thoughts, because the emotional energy of the pain body flows into your thoughts. It uses the structures of the egoic self, its thought structures, and makes them very unhappy. An already not so happy story then becomes dreadfully unhappy, because it's energized by past emotional human pain. And it becomes a self. The illusion is there that this is my pain, me, my painful story, my drama. You're totally in it, and you're forced to think whatever the pain body's energy dictates. Angry thoughts, if the predominant energy of the pain body is anger, sad thoughts, fearful thoughts, what's going to happen to me? And then you imagine what's going to happen to you, and it's all bad. And the emotion loves that. It feeds on thought, because thought is energy. Everything is energy. Every thought you think is an energy form. The emotional entity renews itself through your negative thinking. It loves that. And when it's active, it's feeding on your mind. And you are identified with it so much that you don't know it. All you know is that you are miserably unhappy, and there's a heaviness to your life. And whatever you look, once the pain body is in your mind, whatever you look upon and interpret, you will look through the screen of the conditioning, which is human pain. So you can imagine, I'm sure you know, how distorted your view of the world becomes, your view of other people, your view of your partner, your view of your life situation, your view of anything becomes, how distorted it becomes when you look at it through the veil of your pain. Everything becomes very negative and dreadful. And so the pain body is having a good time, adding to its energy field through your thinking. And this is the addiction to pain that humans carry. It's because of the pain body. There is something in you that loves the drama and the heaviness of emotional pain. It's not you who you are beyond form, it's the pain body with which you identify as yourself. But it's not enough. If you live with other people or partner, the pain body will feed on your partner. First, the pain body has to make your partner unhappy. It can do that easily by pushing the right buttons. And then you get a feedback of pain from your partner. Drama in the relationship happens, and at that moment you want more of it because you are the pain body at that moment. More drama, please, and you will do everything to keep the drama going. But you are the pain body at that moment. And it's feeding on the other person's pain. The other person's pain body probably has also awakened now, and it's feeding on the reactions. So most relationships have to go through their drama again and again, periodically. This is how relationships work, feeding their pain body. Then after a while the pain body withdraws, has had enough, and you feel better, lighter for a while. The relationship is okay again, and you don't realize that you are condemned to repeating the same pattern again as soon as the pain body needs more pain. That is the addiction that humans carry to pain, which is usually totally unconscious. And even people who've been engaged in spiritual work for many years, sometimes many of them get totally overtaken by the pain body when it comes, because it sometimes has enormous energy behind it. And so all that's really you need to do is to see it for what it is, to watch it, recognize it as turbulence, as heaviness. Watch the energy of it, feel it, and what can you do? Yeah, allow it to be. It is as it is at this moment. But that is the key, is to see it. That means something is arising in you that is not part of that. You see that turbulence in you, or the fear, the heaviness, and not even label it anymore, simply feel the energy. It is energy movement. It becomes depersonalized when you see it. It's no longer a self or me, it's human pain. Even pain you can drop. It's energy moving. Maybe it's not very pleasant, it's heavy, but it's energy, and it is as it is. You recognize it as the pain body, you allow it to be, and just watch it as it moves there. That means you've broken the vicious circle. It cannot then move into your mind and feed on your thinking. It cannot then use other people. If you watch it directly, it cannot pretend to be you. That's the work. So pain body can be a great awakener, because every time it comes, it can deepen your presence. You have to be very alert to catch it when it comes. If you're not alert, before you know it, it's already using your mind. It's already taken possession of that. Even at that point, it is possible to become conscious of it, but a bit more difficult when it's already using your mind and you're involved in a stream of negative thinking. To wake up at that moment is possible, but more difficult. catch it when it first comes, but that requires alertness. And so it helps to, I sometimes say, feel the inner body. To have some attention in here is very helpful, because that's where it starts. It lives in the cells of your body. And then you can feel it. And you watch it. It doesn't turn into an unhappy me. It is simply an energy movement in you. It doesn't turn into a story anymore, a self. And that really is liberation. You don't have to wait until there's no remnant of human pain left in you to become liberated. Really, liberation means not to identify with the pain anymore as myself. That's the illusion. That's the opposite of liberation, it's bondage. But the fact that you live on this planet means that you very likely will carry a certain amount of pain in you as a human being on this planet at this time. And that's fine. That drives you very often it becomes an important motivating factor for wanting freedom, for wanting to be free, especially in people whose pain body is very dense, very heavy. They can't stand it anymore. The heaviness of self, of themselves, because they equate it with self, can't stand it anymore. Just as I couldn't live with myself, because myself, a large part of what I thought myself was painful self. It was because my pain body was very dense and heavy, until I couldn't live with it anymore. But I didn't know it was the pain body. All I knew was I can't live with myself anymore. And so I was driven through suffering to the point of surrender, where suddenly the sense of self disidentified from thought forms. It came about through a thought. It was the trigger. The thought was, I can't live with myself, and the question that came after the thought was, if I cannot live with myself, what does that mean? Am I one or two? Who am I? Who is the self? There must be two here. That was a strange question. I couldn't answer the question, but to see that there were two there, I and the self that I couldn't live with, brought about a separation between the thought forms of self, including the emotional energy field of pain body, and the sense of identity of I am, which usually gets mixed up with thought forms. A separation happened. All that was left was I am, but no longer the self. And that was the peace that suddenly I found when I woke up in the morning, because when there's only I am, there's deep peace in that I am. All the things that I thought I was were gone. The structure of the self collapsed. It's rare that it collapses all at once. For most of you, the demolishing process takes place gradually. Some buildings collapse all at once, but most buildings get demolished. You knock off something here, life does that. A chunk goes there, and another chunk goes there. And then finally, voluntarily, you come here, and that does the rest. So, pain body is something that may still be there for a while, but you can be free now simply by recognizing it as the pain body, and by recognizing it, not making it into some personal self, a me. Then it renews itself every time when you believe this is me, my story, my unhappy story, and you're totally immersed in your unhappiness, with all the thought movements that go with it. There are certain collective aspects also to pain body. There's a male pain body that has certain male elements. Female pain body, the pain suffered by women over thousands of years. So there is a female aspect, there's a female collective pain body. I pointed out in the book through menstruation that often awakens just before. The female pain body tends to awaken at that time, so that's very helpful to know, because then you can be alert when you know it's about to happen. Bring in the alertness and wait, actually can watch for it. The time is coming, and you can actually say, okay, I'm going to see what the first sign of it is and what it feels like. And then suddenly something comes, an emotion or physical feeling, and it wants to become a thought very quickly. And you catch it in its attempt to become a thought. Oh, and then you just watch it on the physical level, the vibration. The pain body then waits for, when you are there present with it, almost looking for it, it cannot fully come up then because you're watching. It doesn't like to be looked at. Then it goes back. And then when you're looking somewhere else again, less conscious, after a few drinks or after watching television, you lose some consciousness, and then the pain body will come in. Or you're tired after a heavy day's work and you lose alertness. And if the pain body wants to come up then to feed, it will use that opportunity when you're not so conscious and quickly creep into your thoughts. And before you know it, your thoughts are completely aligned with the pain. And so, interesting to work with the pain body. A time comes when pain body will, and this is the case with most of you, when it comes, instead of pulling you into unconsciousness, as it usually does, when a certain level of consciousness has been reached, and most of you have reached that, then when the pain body comes, you just become more alert. And from that place of alert presence, you can accept it. And the acceptance brings about the change, the transmutation. It can't feed anymore on your mind. The entire pain body, at the root of it lies non-acceptance. So the only way beyond pain body is to bring acceptance to it because it is. It is part of the isness of now. And suddenly you may sense a little bit of space around the pain that you feel. A little bit. Here's the turbulence of the pain, and there's a little bit, I'm talking about something one can't really put into words. There's a little bit of space around it. There's the anger, let's say it's anger, and it wants to become thought, but you watch it only on the level of the turbulence. And the watching and the accepting brings about a sense of spaciousness around it. And so the turbulence is moving still within the spaciousness. That's liberation. And then the spaciousness deepens, or you know it. Suddenly you notice how much spaciousness there actually is. And the pain body is no longer that huge. Before it looked like some huge monster, and suddenly it's a little turbulence in vast spaciousness. Is that all? Yeah. And that was so dreadful? Yes. That made my life so miserable for so many years? Yes. And of course there may be other collective aspects to pain body. Some people's personal pain body may also have their share of the pain body of your country, because certain countries have pain bodies too, some more than others. Countries where there have been a lot of pain and turbulence in history have a heavier collective pain body. So every person in that country, part of their pain body is the country's pain body. You carry that too. Whoa. So in some countries it's heavier than others. The old European countries have a heavier pain body. The further east you go in Europe, the heavier it gets. Usually the collective of that. But every country, there's so much past in these European countries, there's also a lot of pain body, and some more than others. The little countries a little bit less. The New World also has a pain body, not quite as deeply seated as the old, but in America you have in the collective pain body what was done to the native people, what was done to black people in North America. Those two great forms of suffering that were inflicted there have become part of the collective pain body of that country, which means everybody has some of that inside. But collective or not, it's the same. It's your responsibility to see it in yourself, to recognize it in yourself for what it is, to accept it as it is, to bring presence to it, which is all one, and so allow it to be, and then change happens. The pain body is one deep no. No. If it could speak, if its essence, it would be continuously saying no, no, no. Because humans have lived in that state for thousands of years. The egoic no to life. And more no can't free you of no. If you say, no, I don't want this pain body, more no, more pain. So you bring a gentle yes into the no. It is as it is. That's the yes. That's the yes to now. Yes. Compassion arises. Compassion with human pain. No matter whether it's in yourself or you see it in somebody else, compassion arises when you depersonalize the pain body and don't mistake it for a person, neither in yourself nor in somebody else. If you mistake it for who you are in yourself, it becomes the unhappy story of me. It energizes the already unhappy story of me and makes it miserably unhappy. Then it becomes a person. If you do it to somebody else, then you mistake the human pain. That person that is in front of you may be, at that time, possessed by the pain body. It may be in his or her mind. And what pain bodies want from you is some reaction. They will challenge you, and somehow they will try. The pain body would say, it doesn't say it openly, but it would say, I'm unhappy and I want you to be as unhappy as I am. And that's the challenge when you meet another pain body near you. He wants you to draw you into that. And so compassion, first you don't mistake it for who that person is. You realize this is human pain. It's the human condition. Nobody there really. There's no self there. That's an illusion. And then there's no need to react. You can actually allow it to be not only in yourself, you can also allow it to be in the other person, and that's compassion too. Gentle, realizing the human condition. There it is. Nobody can be blamed for that. You can't blame yourself. If pain body comes back in yourself, you could. The mind will try to do that. It'll say, you see, you still have it after all these years. You might as well give up all that spiritual nonsense. You see, you still have the same pain that you've had for years, and you're not going to be free. You're deluding yourself. The pain body is speaking. Go, get drunk, do something. And it can sound very convincing. Once it's using your mind, it can have very convincing arguments that how real, and this whole idea of pain body is just so much nonsense. I mean, it's always, and you know how real this is. It's not the pain body, it's me. That's what the pain body says. So it has all kinds of convincing arguments that will then, once it uses your mind, your thoughts will reflect what the pain body, they will be controlled by the pain body. You will think through the pain body. And so some human beings only experience the pain body once a month or so, and others more frequently, once a week, once every 2 days. How long it stays to feed depends on how much presence there is in you. If presence is there, it passes through fairly quickly, and it can't feed very much. If there's no presence, it can get lodged and stuck in your mind for several days. And finally, it'll have enough and withdraw for a while. And some people walk around with a pain body that is active 90% of the time. That's more rare, but they exist. We probably all know 1 or 2 people who are almost continuously trapped in pain, emotional pain, old pain. And whatever they say to you, whatever they interpret, is through the filter of their pain. So they inhabit, of course, a very unhappy universe. So that's part of our transformation, is to become free of pain body. To become free is not a future state to be achieved. It is recognizing it now, accepting it for what it is now, bring a yes to that now. That is becoming free. You can only become free now. Free is not to mistake it any longer for who you are. You are the space. You are not the object in space. And when pain body is there, that happens to be the object in your consciousness. But you are the much vaster consciousness in which it arises. And you know yourself, you know that you are the much vaster consciousness, because we don't want that to become some kind of belief in your head. I want you to believe that you are consciousness. How do I know that I'm right? You know it by bringing a yes to it, an acceptance, a yes to now. Through that you know that there is a deeper dimension in you, so to speak. It's no separation ultimately between inner and outer. It's just a way of speaking. There is a deeper dimension in you that is beyond that pain, beyond anything that has a form, beyond content. And you know it through yes to now. That's the portal. Anything that you accept takes you to that realization. It doesn't matter what it is. So anything takes you to peace. If you accept it, whatever happens, you bring the yes to it, you welcome it, that condition takes you into deep peace, no matter what. That's the miracle of transformation. And here we are learning to accept the now, even if it doesn't contain great disaster, even if it doesn't contain the pain body at this moment. We just accept whatever form the now takes, whatever form it takes is fine. Could not be otherwise. Welcome. So that could be the mantra. Welcome, or yes, even shorter. The most powerful mantra, yes. That's all you need.